Yo, what is up, guys? Here is 12 minutes of useless League of Legends information, episode 31. God dang. Let's go. Okay, this is kind of crazy, but apparently Diana's Q range can be extended if you look further away. As you can see, my Q isn't hitting normally, even though I'm extending it as far as I can. But when I look across the map and cast my Q here, it reaches further and hits the target. I mean, how crazy is that? There's got to be at least one highlight clip out there that someone's clicking across the map just to extend their Q just slightly for a kill. By the way, this tip was actually sent in by one of you, so if you have any useless info you want to send over, feel free to do so at outsidejokelol@gmail.com. Did you know that Briar's W blood frenzy was almost going to allow her to attack her allies? Yeah, I can think of at least one reason why that'd be a bad idea. Granada is one thing when it's out of your control when it happens, but if you get control of it, it just doesn't really mix with tilted League players. So it would almost be worth it if you could get the gold off your teammates, which now that I mention it would actually be broken because you could just claim people's bounties. Anyways, additionally, there was also an iteration of her ultimate that revived her and dealt physical damage in an area and healed her damage dealt if the ability was off cooldown. Pretty crazy stuff. Now for a quick few other random facts about Briar. She is 5'3". She's around 20 years old, and in the lore she considers Talon a quote-unquote friend. Have you ever wondered what would happen if everyone in a ranked match were to leave the game at the same time? Well, it turns out if all 10 players were to do so, the game would actually get scratched and it would turn into what Riot calls a ghost game, meaning that no one will gain or lose LP. And this rarely ever happens, but it does happen from time to time because at the end of the game, a lot of players like to exit the game early to try and either load into their next one faster or just skip the loading screen. And if all 10 players were to do so before the Nexus explodes, then the game would be voided and the winners would receive no LP and the losers would also not lose any LP. In other words, you didn't hear this from me, but if you're about to lose and they're about to destroy your Nexus, exit the game early and there's a tiny chance that you could not lose LP that game. On the flip side though, if you're about to win, you should probably just wait it out just in case. Funny enough, players way back in the day would actually take advantage of this function and do something called drop hacking, where whenever they were about to lose the game, they'd actually cause everyone else's internet to crash so the players DC'd at the same time and then they wouldn't lose any LP. Talk about sweaty strats. This is kind of a cool one. There's a website called yearin.lol and it's basically a Spotify recap for League of Legends. It essentially shows you a bunch of fun stats like how many games you've played, how many champions you've played, how many killing sprees you've went on, the ability that you used most, and so on. It's honestly pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's obviously only available for the year 2022 right now, but I assume a 2023 recap will be released in the not so distant future. Did you know that in Kha'Zix's Q description, his name is actually spelled wrong? Well, kind of. In only this ability, the Z in Zix is lowercase for some reason. As you can see, all of his other abilities are fine and spelled correctly. It's just his in-game Q description. I mean, even his description in the client is fine. Honestly, it's kind of annoying now that you can't unsee it. You're welcome. This is apparently what happens when Briar ults someone across the map, but Urgot also ults the Briar right after. It looks like the Urgot barely manages to trigger the second part of his ult right before the Briar ult caused him to jump. This is quite the interaction. I don't think I've ever seen a champion get yeeted back and forth so hard before. Okay, I don't know how many people know about this, but a few weeks ago before the Asian Games took place, Faker was actually getting a ton of hate from BTS fans because they found out that if he gets gold at the Asian Games, which spoilers, he did, then he would be exempt from having to do military service in Korea. And obviously BTS wasn't. And this kind of turned into a huge war on Twitter between BTS and esports fans. Now, what some of you may not know is that the BTS community, or ARMY as they go by, is pretty notorious for being very what's the word? Passionate when it comes to defending BTS. In fact, they are known to be absolutely ruthless to anyone that gets in their way and are probably known as the force to deal with when it comes to internet communities. But let me tell you, the League of Legends community gave them a run for their money. Like, this is just one example of a post a BTS fan put out, and holy crap, after Faker won gold at the Asian Games, you guys went off on them. I mean, look at these posts, dude. People were just spamming these in their comments. Also, I couldn't find any of the original posts they made because the League of Legends community made everyone delete them. Not gonna lie, I think they really underestimated the tenacity of the League of Legends community here. What's kind of even crazier is that Faker didn't even get to play in the finals, but since he played in the earlier games, he was still exempt. But in case you didn't know, this is actually huge for him because he only had 1 year left until he had to enlist. In other words, him getting gold at the Asian Games could have actually extended his career for a few years, because honestly, I don't know if he'd be able to enlist for 2 years and then come back into the pro scene. Anyways, pretty eventful all around. Also, side note, some some of the BTS members actually play League of Legends. Kim Taeyong is Diamond 4, and that's obviously on the Korean server too, so it's pretty impressive. And 3 years ago, BTS and Faker actually played a game of Mundo Dodgeball together. I saw this on a TikTok where you can apparently 360 snipe when playing Ash. I guess if you W flash ER, you can do stuff like this. If I ever die to someone like this, I'm actually quitting League. So I did a poll a while back and asked you all if you played League of Legends with or without a locked cam, and honestly, I thought the split was going to be heavily favored to no, but apparently it turns out that half of you play with a locked cam. That's actually insane. I mean, I use my spacebar to center my screen sometimes, but dang, I did not expect these results. In case you didn't know, there's actually a free emote and icon you can get in the shop for a limited time to commemorate the Asian games that took place recently. Okay, I guess it's not free, but it's 1 blue essence. Well, the pro League of Legends normal season is officially over and Worlds has already started, so here's some random data from the 13th season of League of Legends. Sejuani was the most picked champion, being grabbed 2,724 times. Maokai was the most banned at 3,193 bans. 13 players ended the season playing at least 10 games and having a 0% win rate. And lastly, the team with the fastest average game, or also known as the fastest time to lose, was a Slovenian team named Extreme Dominators. They also went 0-14 in one of their games, and they were down 10,000 gold at the 13-minute mark. So yeah, I'd say they should maybe consider a name change, but they're also no longer around for some reason. So everyone knows that Gragas and Jax were drinking buddies. But what you probably didn't know is that according to the old lore, Gragas and Jax allegedly sexually assaulted 2 waitresses. The waitresses claimed to have their buttocks their butts inappropriately fondled. Also, according to the lore, both of them escaped before Noxian authorities could show up. I guess it turns out though that the 2 waitresses did not in fact want a piece of the champ. In case you didn't know, Jax's fishing passive is now in the game. As long as you stand in the river for a few seconds on Jax, you'll start fishing and gain 1 GP for every fish you catch. Also, allegedly, if you catch goldfish, you also temporarily gain 1 AP in addition to the 1 GP, but I don't know if this is true anymore because I tested this for a while and I didn't have any luck. I could also be doing something wrong though, so who knows. I mentioned in my last video that Jin costs 4,444 blue essence to buy, but did you know that Vel'Koz also has a special blue essence cost? Vel'Koz costs 3,141, or in other words 3.141, which are the first 4 letters of pi. Geometry things, you know? When it came to making the sound effects for Bard's lines, every single note was hand-picked together by the designers. It was also composed of 4 main components: Alphenhorn, Egyptian flutes, piano tone clusters, and synthesizers. Also, Bard mains probably already know this, but Bard actually says different voice lines depending on how many meeps he currently has at his side. The real Bard players probably know how many meeps he's got without even looking. Here's an example of a no meep line. Here's an example of a 1 meep line. Here's a 2 meep line. And here's a 3 or 4 meep line. Honestly, I kind of forget how satisfying his sounds are. Hey, if you're enjoying, please consider subscribing, and of course, puppy. This has got to be one of the craziest saves in League I have ever seen. If League of Legends were to shoot a cinematic movie, this is the scene that would be in it. Caitlyn tries to ult Orianna for the kill, but then Talia comes out of nowhere and perfectly blocks the Caitlyn ult. I mean, it really does not get much better than that. It is the teammate that you will never get in your ranked games. Honestly, there's not too much to say about this next one, other than I feel like we've all been there. I mean, you just know that Vayne was stressing with her finger on that flash button, and the Malphite was just having a great time. I can just picture the guy behind Malphite being the meme dude who was singing payphone. This has got to be one of the most tilting things that could possibly happen to you in League. And that says something. Imagine backing, getting your recall off, thinking you're fine, only to realize that Annie's Q actually went through, flew all the way across the map just to cancel your teleport that you started so you could get back to lane. I mean, look at that wave. At that point, I honestly think it's okay to quit. Gwen's seriously gonna need some therapy after that. This is, well, I think you can figure it out. I mean, imagine getting sent this to you after your ranked game. There's a link in the description if you want to send these to anyone. There's also one for mid ADC top support and even phrases like GG easy. Yeah, you get the point. So a while ago, G2 showed their jerseys for Worlds, and they're basically baseball themed, which is pretty cool. But the best part are the stripes, because they're not just lines. Instead, they actually say 0 and 3 all the way down, which you gotta respect. I feel like this wasn't announced very much, but Arcane Season 2 will be released in the winter of 2024. So it's gonna be a hot second. I'm guessing they're gonna release it with Riot's 15th anniversary in November. 15th anniversary though, that's pretty insane. Warning, these next 2 facts are kind of spoilers if you haven't watched the Golden Guardians versus BDS Worlds qualifying series, so skip here here if you want to, but long story short, BDS smacked the crap out of Golden Guardians in Game 2, meaning that Golden Guardians has arguably claimed the world record for the fastest speed run home, which is kind of impressive. However, I say arguably because I guess technically speaking, it wasn't a Worlds game yet. It was just a game to get into Worlds. So I guess if we're only looking at the actual Worlds games, then Gamania Bears probably hold the record for that back in 2013 when they lost 0-2 to SKT, and then they were done. And then they flew back home to Taiwan. They only played 2 games. Honestly, the thing is, this is mostly because the Worlds brackets back then were absolutely terrible. Essentially, the number 1 seeds from each of the regions got into quarters automatically, so some teams would play their first and potentially last games of Worlds in the quarters. Which brings me to the runner-up for the fastest world speed run, which is probably Cloud9 in 2013, because they also lost their first round matchup to Fnatic. They lost 1-2 and then they were knocked out. Moral of the story is don't play Worlds in 2013 unless you're going to, you know, win. Nah, man. Okay, so I was watching the first day of Worlds, and apparently Garen is the only champion that hasn't been selected in the LCK for the past 11 years. That's pretty crazy. This information came up after Adam smacked Golden Guardians around with Garen, a pretty unusual pick for pro play. But after all, that's why Koreans seem to like Adam so much. They really like his weird champion pool and playstyle. Ironically, Adam's champion pool consists of Garen, Olaf, Darius, and Set, which each of their first letters spell out gods, so the Korean community has been kind of making memes around him as well. And of course, it's also coincidentally the name of this year's Worlds theme song. With that being said, the gods acronym can easily be turned around into dogs instead, so hopefully he keeps doing well. Keep in mind that this video probably won't go out until they play, so yeah. Honestly, this whole acronym thing kind of reminds me of TSMXD, which if you don't know, for all you youngins out there, it's basically when one of the teams spells out TSMXD with their champions during the ban phase. For example, here is a perfect TSMXD ban. T for Tryndamere, S for Soraka, M for Malzahar, and so on. If your team's ever unsure who to ban, TSMXD is always a safe bet. It's such a sneaky strategy that even Azale doesn't see it coming sometimes.
Dareth gonna get banned out. Interesting. So
no, it's not interesting, man. It's TSMXD.
Oh, okay. Season.
They're gonna be.
A second I thought they were serious. Yeah, okay.
There's an article that listed all the all-time LCK players and stats, which is pretty interesting to check out. It's just kind of cool to see all the comparisons between literally the best players this game has ever seen. And lastly, this is a photo of a giraffe. I don't know how it's relevant, but it's there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to go check out all the other episodes, and I will see you next time. A ginormous shout out to all my seriously amazing patrons and members: We Hat, Gooseman, Set, Ryan, Hegel. And I know I say it every time, but you guys help me so much more than you know. And also a huge shout out to my tier 3 patrons, Stefan and Wolf. Thank you both. All right, bye.